Hi everybody and welcome back to Trudge, Journey to Being Recovered. I am your host. My name is Dexter. I'm a recovered drug addict and alcoholic. Hope everybody is doing well. Welcome to this week's submission for the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Last week we had to finish a little abruptly. Had an emergency I had to take care of, but we were working in the middle of about Bill Story. Bill Story, the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, and his life story and testament to the program of altruism and the solution to being recovered from this disease. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to continue that this week. I'd like to get through it. Hopefully we can. It's a little long, but I'm going to try to power through it today, and if I can, we will. And if not, we'll do part 3 next week, okay? So let's get started with all the work. Pens, highlighters in hand. We're all set and ready to go, but as we always do before we start the work, we're going to open with a third step prayer for those of us who care to join, and then we will get back and finish what we started last week, okay? It's on page 63 for those of you who still do not know it by heart yet, and for those of you that do, if you take a moment and join me. And this is also highlighted pink, middle of page 63. This is the third step prayer. God, I offer myself to Thee, to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, so I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help, of Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. Thank you for those of you who took part in that, and let's get right to it, okay? We ended up on the top of page 7 last week, and we'll start with the first paragraph. Now this is Bill telling his story. It continues with the beginning. It says, "My brother-in-law is a physician." Hopefully everybody sees that. "And through his kindness and that of my mother, I was placed in a nationally known hospital for the mental and physical rehabilitation of alcoholics." This was Towns Hospital. This is where Dr. Silkworth worked. "Under the so-called belladonna treatment, my brain cleared. Hydrotherapy and mild exercise helped much. Best of all, I met a kind doctor who explained that though certainly selfish and foolish, I had been seriously ill, bodily and mentally." There he is giving, his opinion of the disease to Bill W. "It relieved me somewhat to learn that in alcoholics the will is amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor, though it often remains strong in other respects. This guy's out there, he's working as a stock guy, he's got, working as a law guy. I mean, Bill is he made something of himself. He's no dummy, but when it came down to combating alcohol, that he had no answer, as many of us do. Or don't, I should say. My incredible behavior in the face of desperate desire to stop was explained. Understanding myself now, I fared forth in high hope. For 3 or 4 months, the goose hung high, so that's saying that for 3 or 4 months, there wasn't really a whole lot of drinking. He felt really good about himself. He was able to control it somewhat, and I had a similar situation like that happen to me. I went to town regularly and even made a little money. So now he's starting to pick up again. He's starting to get a little money in his pocket. All the things that he used to do before his drinking became out of control is starting to happen to him again. So he's feeling really good about himself. He's feeling like maybe I have this deal licked. I went to town regularly and even made a little money. Surely this was the answer, self-knowledge. Next to that, I have written, not the answer. Okay? If self-knowledge was the answer to combating drug addiction and alcoholism, all you would have to be is smart. You could be able to know, this work academically, and you could arrest this disease. I don't care how smart you are. Your law degrees, your doctorates, your PhDs, your master's degrees, your college education means absolutely nothing when it comes down to battling the disease of alcoholism. I learned this the hard way. I thought if I just had a better working knowledge of, what exactly it was, that I might be able to get a handle on it. And the truth of the matter is that self-knowledge avails us nothing when it comes to this disease. That is not the answer. If somebody's telling you that's the answer, be be very mindful of that. Most of us, we get placed beyond human aid. Self-knowledge is not going to fix this. There's no human being that I ever turned to that could guarantee me staying clean and sober. It just never happened. But it was not, for the frightful day came when I drank once more. So he's telling you, self-knowledge is not the answer. He picked up again shortly thereafter. The curve of my declining moral and bodily health fell off like a ski jump. After a time, I returned to the hospital. This was the finish, the curtain it seemed to be. My weary and despairing wife was informed that it would all end with heart failure during delirium tremens, or I would develop a wet brain, perhaps within a year. So delirium tremens, some people call those the DTs, the shakes that you see a lot of these hopeless alcoholics having in the mornings. I even had a little bit of them when it came to some other substances when it was time for me to tail off those, and a wet brain. Sometimes you can drink yourself to the point where you give yourself permanent brain damage. That's a hard sight to see. I've witnessed a little bit of that. And this is what the doctors were telling, Bill's wife Lois, what was going to happen to him within a year. His alcoholism progressed so greatly that that's what the end result looked like. She would soon have to give me over to the undertaker or the asylum. So now we're seeing the ends, the jails, institutions, the deaths, the undertaker, they were going to bury this guy. This is what he was feeling and what was going to happen to him. Or the asylum, way back in the early 1930s, that's what they were doing with hopeless alcoholics. They were categorizing them in the same class as people that were crazy because they had no answer to help these men and women. Straitjackets, being chained to beds, being put in padded rooms. This is the end result, and this is what Bill thought was coming his way. They did not need to tell me. I knew and almost welcomed the idea. How bad is that you could welcome something like that, to think that that's going to be your end, It was a devastating blow to my pride. Who had thought so well of myself and my abilities and of my capacity to surmount obstacles, was cornered at last. So he's telling you, in all his other affairs, he shined, but when it came to combating this deal of alcoholism, he was at a loss. He had nothing he tried worked, just like nothing I really tried worked. Now, I was to plunge into the dark, joining an endless procession of sots who had gone on before. Sots, just people like him. The Skid Row junkies, the hopeless alcoholics that just never made it. I thought of my poor wife. There had been much happiness after all. What would I not give to make amends? But that was over now, and it's funny because if Bill only knew that, he was at the point where as dark as before the dawn, he would get a chance to make his amends, due to having his spiritual experience, and make things right with his wife Lois. No words can tell of the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. So I'm going to say let's underline the words loneliness and despair. At our ends, for most of us, we understand what those are. Not everybody understands, Crown Royal. Not everyone understands Budweiser. Some of us drank those or didn't drink those. Not all of us understand heroin. Some of us did those and didn't do those. But the feelings that we get to experience at the bitter ends, that loneliness and despair, that's something that I believe most, if not all of us, can relate to. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. Okay, I have alcohol was my master underlined with the word powerlessness next to it. So we have come to the point where Bill W.'s drinking has absolutely grown to the point where he is powerless over the substance. He absolutely has to have it. There is no control. There is no choice. He has put himself in the realm of being placed beyond human aid. He is as hopeless an alcoholic as medical doctors have ever seen. Trembling, I stepped from the hospital a broken man. A broken man. That's a hard sight. Fear sobered me for a bit, and for a while fear sobered me for a bit, but we know that fear can't keep us sober. I knew if I drove drunk I might end up in jail. I drove drunk anyway, it didn't matter. Then came the insidious insanity of that first drink. I'm going to underline the words first drink, because the first drink is the most important one, and you can't get drunk, you can't, put it, if you put it in you, that's where it is. You know, it starts and ends with the insanity of the first drink. And on Armistice Day, 1934, I was off again. Everyone became resigned to the certainty that I would have to be shut up somewhere or stumble along to a miserable end. You know, Bill stumbled around quite a bit, got hurt quite a few times. That's just what happened to him. How dark it is before the dawn. In reality, that was the beginning of my last debauch. I was soon to be catapulted in what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I have the words fourth dimension underlined. You know, when I first started doing this work with my sponsor, we would talk about this quote-unquote fourth dimension. It sounded like a bunch of bullshit to me. I gotta be honest. You know, I mean, what is that? You know, I mean, that's like something that you think you hear about in like Star Wars or Star Trek. You know, but I'm here to tell you people that you know, that fourth dimension that they're talking about in the book, you know, that's that spiritual experience that Bill's talking about that took hold of him, that kind of like skyrocketed him into like a better way of living. I understand that now, what they were trying to say, but when I first read that, I was like, I don't know if I can get with this. It kind of, I don't know, it kind of put me off, but believe me when I tell you, as it starts to happen to you, you understand what they're talking about. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. That's what I believe what my life is today. You know, I've had some good times. I really have, with and without alcohol. I believe the best years of my existence lie ahead. You know, the book tells me that. That's what I've been experiencing. It gets better and better the more that I give, the more that I help others, is really the more that I receive. And this is what happened to Bill. Near the end of that bleak November, I sat drinking in my kitchen. With a certain satisfaction, I reflected there was enough gin concealed about the house to carry me through that night and the next day. My wife was at work, so this became the norm for him. Loris is at the department store, and he's home just getting drunk, just getting hammered, you know, just to basically breathe. That's what he felt like he needed to do. That's what his body needed. It craved the alcohol. His mind obsessed about it, and this is what he did. I wondered whether I dare hide a full bottle of gin near the head of our bed. I would need it before daylight. So he's gone so far to the point that he doesn't think he can get through a night of sleeping without having a bottle of gin concealed near enough that he can drink just to go back to sleep, just to get through the night. That's bad. That's bad. I mean, I never drank that badly. But that, you know, he's trying to explain to you, you know, I mean, he was very close to the gates of death. My musing was interrupted by the telephone. The cheery voice of an old school friend asked if he might come over. That old school friend that Bill W. is talking about, his name is Ebby Thatcher, E-B-B-Y, capital T, H-A-T-C-H-E-R. Ebby Thatcher is a very important person in the grand scheme of the formulation of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, he's a very important chess piece. If Ebby never went and 12-step Bill, this may not have come to fruition. Ebby Thatcher was a man who had a lot of experience in drinking with Bill W. and was a member of the Oxford groups, which preceded the 12 steps. You know, and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, the Oxford groups had 6 steps, but they were also about having, you know, spiritual experiences and giving away what they had in an effort to keep it. The program of altruism, really, it spawned from there. This deal has been going on since early times, but it most certainly did not start with Alcoholics Anonymous. It did start with the Oxford groups, and that's something not a lot of people know. I think that's important to know. He was sober. I have he was sober underlined. Obviously, it's in italics. It's very important. Ebby Thatcher's sober, a running buddy that you haven't seen in so long. You see him and he looks different, and the guy's sober. It was years since I could remember his coming to New York in that condition. I was amazed. Rumor had it that he had been committed for alcoholic insanity. I wondered how he had escaped. Of course, he would have dinner, and then I could drink openly with him. So Bill's mind is just about, you know, rekindling old flame with this guy and getting back to doing what they used to do, which was, you know, drinking and the debauchery. That's what he knows of Ebby Thatcher. Here he is sober, but he's thinking it won't be long. We'll have some dinner and then we'll have some drinks. This is going to be highlighted orange. It says, unmindful of his welfare, I thought only of recapturing the spirit of other days. So that's just, you know, showing Bill's selfishness. You know, that self-centeredness, that ego, that most of us struggle with. You know, that sentence is alluding to that. You know, that's the root of our troubles as addicts and alcoholics. And there it is again. He doesn't care that Ebby's sober. You know, he just remembers the old Ebby, and that's what he wants. He's not thinking about giving anything. It's all about, well, what can he get? And he's like, two alcoholics are better than one. Let's get this party going. There was a time we had chartered an airplane to complete a jag. His coming was an oasis in this dreary desert of futility. I mean, Bill's writings are unbelievable. You know, thinking of, how bad things are, you're out in the middle of a desert and here comes this friend, and he's the oasis. I mean, it's just like, to him, that's the solution, is seeing Ebby and having someone else to drink with. The very thing, an oasis. Drinkers are like that. The door opened and he stood there, fresh-skinned and glowing. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? Well, Ebby Thatcher had a spiritual awakening, you could tell when someone's got this. There's just something about them that they look different. They've got this sparkle in their eye. It just shows. A spiritual experience absolutely shows, and that's what Bill is witnessing on Ebby. I pushed a drink across the table. He refused it. Disappointed but curious, I wondered what had gotten into the fellow. He wasn't himself. Come, what's this all about? I queried. He looked straight at me. Simply but smilingly, he said, I've got religion. So back then, religion, God, they went together. That's what, there wasn't a way to discuss having a spiritual awakening without, equating it to being in a religious manner. And so this is what he brings to Bill. Bill, I was aghast, so that was it. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. Now I suspected a little cracked about religion. He had that starry-eyed look. Yes, the old boy was on fire, all right, but bless his heart. Let him rant. Besides, my gin would last longer than his preaching. This next sentence is important. But he did no ranting. The word no is circled. I have that circled and highlighted orange. We're not here to rant. We're not here to convert people. We're not going door to door to try to convince you your way of life, your manner of living, your religious beliefs are wrong. We're not doing that. There is no ranting to be done. There's no evangelistic phase that we're doing with this work. If someone wants it and they ask, then we open our ourselves up to them and lay it on thick. Tell them about what we've done. Let them know how good it is. There's a whole chapter in the big book entailed to that is called Working with Others, and that's step 12, which we will get to at a later date. But we don't do any ranting, and Ebby did none to Bill. In a matter-of-fact way, he told how two men had appeared in court persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. They had told of a simple religious idea, or another way of saying spiritual awakening at that point, and a practical program of action. The program was the steps, the 6 steps of the Oxford groups. And I believe the two men may have been Roland Hazard and Dr. Young. I'm not sure about that, but I believe that those are the two men that showed up at court that day to help Ebby, get well. They convinced that judge. That was 2 months ago. I have 2 months circled. In 2 months, you can go from a hopeless alcoholic to having a spiritual experience. Bill Dotson did it in a few days. Bill W. was working on his 9th step in Towns Hospital when he had his spiritual experience. And nowadays we're telling people to take their time. I'm glad that when it came time for me to want to work these steps, my sponsor was on me. And we didn't take our time. We were thorough. And it took longer than I thought it would take, but it took what it took for me. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that it doesn't have to take 4 years to finish 12 steps. These guys, in 2 months, Ebby started to change and be different. And the result was self-evident. It worked. When nothing else worked, this worked. He had come to pass his experience along to me, if I cared to have it. The word if is circled. We keep what we have by giving it away, but if the other person doesn't want it, they don't want it. But by giving it away, by practicing the altruism that is, spoken about in the big book, we get to stay recovered. Okay? But we're not pushing this on anybody. Ebby Thatcher is just thinking of keeping himself sober and thinking that this might be something that could work for Bill. He knew Bill sober, he knew Bill drunk. I was shocked but interested. Certainly I was interested. I had to be, for I was hopeless. He talked for hours. Childhood memories rose before me. I could almost hear the sound of the preacher's voice as I sat, on still Sundays, way over there on the hillside. There was that preferred temperance pledge I never signed. My grandfather's good-natured contempt of some church folk and their doings. His insistence that the spheres really had their music, but his denial of the preacher's right to tell him how he must listen. His fearlessness as he spoke of these things just before he died. These recollections welled up from the past. They made me swallow hard. So now, Ebby's been there for a few hours, and Bill is just really reminiscing about his life. The focus right now is really not on drinking. Ebby has his attention. Even if he knew he didn't want to stop, seeing someone that drank the way he did, sober, was alluring to him. It made sense to him that he needed to be talking to Ebby at that moment, and he was paying attention. That wartime day in old Winchester Cathedral came back again. This is where it really starts to turn for Bill. And we go from talking about the problem to starting to begin to talk about the solution in Bill's story. I had always believed in a power greater than myself. There it is. Just the fact that he had always believed in it, the door is open now. Now he's willing. He's probably stopped drinking at this point. He's really giving Ebby a good ear. I had often pondered these things. I was not an atheist. So he knows clearly that he wasn't an atheist. Few people really are, for that means blind faith in the strange proposition that this universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. So he's basically telling you that, that he doesn't believe that. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even the evolutionists, suggested vast laws and forces at work. Despite contrary indications, I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlay all. So he's telling you that he basically has always believed in a higher power. That's not been an issue for him. This is going to be highlighted, orange. How could there be so much of precise and immutable law and no intelligence? So Bill's, basically, he's at this point, he's like bewildered. He just doesn't understand how this could be happening to Ebby and not really understanding what's behind it. Although he doesn't not believe in God, still wanting to drink, not wanting to drink, he's kind of caught in a crossroads of this 12-step moment that he's having with Ebby Thatcher. He goes on to say, I simply had to believe in a spirit of the universe who knew neither time nor limitation, but that's as far as I had gone. What Bill doesn't understand is that's all it takes to make your beginning. Just the willingness to believe that something is out there that can help you will take you so far in this program. With ministers and the world's religions, I parted right there. When they talked of a God personal to me, who was love, superhuman strength, and direction, I became irritated and my mind snapped shut against such a theory. To Christ, I conceded the certainty of a great man, not too closely followed by those who claimed him. His moral teaching most excellent. For myself, I had adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I discarded. So he's telling you he picked and chose how he felt about the power of God. Or in this case, he says Christ. The wars which had been fought, the burnings and the chicanery, that's just another way of saying trickery, that religious dispute had facilitated made me sick. I honestly doubted whether on balance the religions of mankind had done any good. Judging from what I had seen in Europe and since, the power of God in human affairs was negligible. Brotherhood of man a grim jest. If there was a devil, he seemed a boss, the boss universal, and he certainly had me. So now, he's a little skeptical. He's seeing what's happened to Ebby, but he's really not sure, because he thinks about his experiences with, the world and how everything had come to light for him as far as God is concerned in all these different aspects. But my friend sat before me, and he made the point-blank declaration that God has done for him what he could not do for himself. That's that first step, that Ebby's talking to Bill about, and that's what happened to me. God did for me what I tried to do on my own for so long, doing every method possible to get there except using our literature. It's just, to me, I can't even imagine, what was I thinking, but I wanted to do it my way, and that's how I had to learn. I'm explaining to you, the viewer, the new person, the old-timer, the retread, whatever you are, you don't have to go through that. You don't have to suffer, okay? His human will had failed. I have that underlined. Again, we're talking and speaking in reference to no human power is going to be able to solve this. You may be able to keep yourself sober today, but there's going to come a day without a spiritual awakening that you're going to drink again. This has been something that's happened to legions of drug addicts and alcoholics over history. And some people can do it for long periods of time. There's some stories in the chapter more about alcoholism that speak to men who've done it for 25 years, but then had a drink after 25 years. Putting together long periods of abstinence it's not kryptonite to this disease, not even close. The doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he had admitted complete defeat. He had admitted complete defeat underlined, and that's what it takes, recognizing that powerlessness over the substance. Then he had in effect been raised from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known, that fourth dimension, that they talked about in the previous page. Had this power originated in him? Obviously it had not. There had been no more power in him than there was in me at that minute. And this was none at all. Bill was completely powerless. A day's worth of drinking like it's a job, like a 9 to 5. That's just, delirium tremens. He was a mess. If anybody watched the movie My Name is Bill W., you see James Wood gives a spectacular depiction of Bill in his most hopeless states. At the end, he was an absolute wreck. That floored me. It began to look as though religious people were right after all. Here was something at work in the human heart which had done the impossible. My ideas of miracles were drastically revised right then. I have the word miracles underlined. And again, a couple weeks ago I spoke about, some of what people could view as miracles, babies that aren't supposed to be born being born, men and women who in wheelchairs getting up and walking, they are some of the lesser forms of miracles, and those are people like you and I who have recovered, who are not drinking. Ebby Thatcher to Bill was a miracle at that moment, and he very well was. He was the catalyst for starting this program. Miracle. It doesn't always have to be some big aha moment. Some of the lesser forms of miracle are walking this earth. Never mind the musty past. Here sat a miracle, and the word miracle is underlined again, directly across the kitchen table. He shouted great tidings. And that's kind of what, that's what I do, to people who are interested and ask, I let them know that this is real and they can have it too. Bearing witness, what that third step prayer is asking us to do. Ebby Thatcher was bearing witness to Bill W. at that moment, and a miracle happened. I saw that my friend was much more than inwardly reorganized, which is just another way of saying spiritual awakening, psychic change, personality change, spiritual experience. They all mean the same thing, okay? He was on different footing. His roots grasped a new soil. I love that line. His roots grasped a new soil, and that's how I felt. I felt what I had been needing to do and reaching for. I no longer did that. I went a different direction, and I started to feel different. Despite the living example of my friend, there remained in me the vestiges of my old prejudice. So he's seeing it, and a lot of people will say seeing is believing, but he's still skeptical. He's still really, really skeptical. The word God aroused a certain antipathy. When the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me, this feeling was intensified. I didn't like the idea. I could go for such conceptions as creative intelligence, universal mind, or the spirit of nature, but I resisted a thought of a czar of the heavens, however loving his sway might be. I have since talked with scores of men who have felt the same way. So, he started to get all hell-bent on how it would be called and what it would be, and a lot of people do that. I did that. I didn't want your God. I'm not a Catholic. I'm not a Protestant. I'm not Jewish. I don't want your version of God. I was misinformed. I was confused. That's not what it's about. And Ebby tells us, in the next two sentences, exactly what the turning point for Bill is here. It says, my friend suggested what then seemed a novel idea. And it's just huge. Highlighted orange, he said, why don't you choose your own conception of God? And it's like somebody took the shackles off when I learned that I could have my own God personal to me. It didn't have to be what you were, or what his was, or what they did. It was my own. It was huge. And this is where we see the shift begin to take place in Bill W. That statement hit me hard. I have those words underlined. Bill's going to start to get it here, okay? It melted my icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. I stood in the sunlight at last, underlined, okay? This is all important. Anytime something's in italics, it's just so important. They don't do that by accident, okay? I just have a star next to this whole next paragraph. It says, it was only a matter of being willing, and the word willing is circled, to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. I saw that growth could start from that point. And that's where it starts. Having that willingness to believe in a power greater than yourself is really what took me to the point of having a spiritual awakening. I mean, obviously there was some other work that I had to do, but that's really the only requirement. Upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it? Of course I would. So now he's convinced that, Ebby's probably really laid it on thick, and it's the fact that he's just not drinking. Just think about like your biggest running buddy doing that. You're going to be curious to see what's going on. And look, the bottom line is Bill was miserable. Why? Of course he would want to stop drinking. Thus, I was convinced. I have the word convinced highlighted orange. You need to be convinced that this can work for you for it to work for you. If you think it won't, it won't. If you can conceive it, you can definitely achieve it. And that's what this work is. He was convinced. I was convinced, and it worked. Okay? That God concerned us with humans when we want him enough. My prayers, my relationship with God was sporadic at best. It was like a bad Wi-Fi connection. It was foxhole prayers. It was only when I needed something. It was never predicated on the power of God, which, is what our steps are all about, which is what the solution is. At long last I saw, I felt, I believed. Scales of pride and prejudice fell from my eyes. A new world came into view. The real significance of my experience in the cathedral burst upon me. For a brief moment, I had needed and wanted God. There had been a humble willingness. I have those two words underlined, humble willingness, to have him with me, and he came, humbly asking God for that help, bearing yourself to God, abandoning yourself to God. It will come to you. Okay? This is my experience and experience of millions of recovered drug addicts and alcoholics over history. But soon, the sense of his presence had been blotted out by worldly clamors, mostly those within myself. And so it had been ever since. How blind I had been. And I felt that way too. God, how blind was I? What was I doing? What was I thinking? The truth of the matter is I wasn't ready. I wasn't willing to go to any lengths. And until you are, you're not going to go anywhere. And that's what happened to Bill. At the hospital, I was separated from alcohol for the last time. Treatment seemed wise, for I showed signs of delirium tremens. So 4 bouts, 4 stays, in Towns Hospital under the care of, the great Dr. William D. Silkworth. And the last time was the last time for Bill. His recovery date, sobriety date, as some people like to say, whatever, was December 10th, 1934. That was the last time he took a drink, and his permanent recovery started soon thereafter until he died in 1971. He was sober. This is going to be a paragraph that's going to have a lot of the steps in it. It says, "There I humbly offered myself to God, as then I understood him to do with me as he would." That sounds just like the third step. Well, that is the third step right in there. That third step prayer, there's bits and pieces in there. I have written third step with an arrow going into that sentence. "I placed myself unreservedly under his care and direction. I admitted for the first time that of myself I was nothing, and that without him I was lost." That's that second step. God is everything or he is nothing. "I ruthlessly faced my sins and became willing," and the word willing is always circled, "to have my newfound friend take them away root and branch." That's steps 4, 6, and 7. "I have not had a drink since. My schoolmate visited me," Ebby Thatcher visited me again, "and I fully acquainted him with my problems and deficiencies." That's step 5. "We made a list of people I had hurt or towards whom I felt resentment." I have the word resentment underlined and circled. Resentment's of the number one offender. We'll get to that when we work our fourth step. "I expressed my entire willingness," and the word willingness is circled, "to approach these individuals, admitting my wrong. Never was I to be critical of them." The word never is circled. "I was to write all such matters to the utmost of my ability." Those are steps 8 and 9. And so for our newer viewers, don't get so wound up if none of this stuff is making sense to you. As we go through the steps, you will see what it is I'm talking about. But these 2 paragraphs, this is really the birth of the 12 steps in its entirety here that Bill's talking about. "I was to test my thinking by my new God consciousness within." That's step 10, taking that personal inventory every day. I have the word God consciousness, I have that underlined. The next sentence is going to be highlighted orange and underlined. It says, "Common sense would thus become uncommon sense." What he thought he knew, it all went. The things that he felt like he needed to do, things that I used to hold my head on and think I had to do, that just became uncommon sense to me. So I could have this new way of life, this new direction, this new psychic change. For that to happen, I had to let that stuff go. "I was to sit quietly when in doubt, asking only for direction and strength to meet my problems as he would have me." This is going to be highlighted orange. "Never was I to pray for myself." I have "never was I to pray for myself" also underlined. "Except as my request bore on my usefulness to others. Then only might I expect to receive, but that would be in great measure." That's step 11. This next paragraph is going to be highlighted yellow. It should already be highlighted yellow if you've done the points of interest with me. It's POY yellow, and this is the most important part of Bill's story. And this speaks to step 12. This says, "My friend promised me when these things were done, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator," which is just another way of saying the God of your understanding, that I would have the elements of a way of living which answered all my problems. The word "all" is circled, and that's what I'm telling you, the viewer. At the end of this thing, when we're done working this program online in this capacity, that's what I'm telling you. That's promised to you. Your whole life can change. You can have a spiritual experience, and you can be happy, joyous, and free, and not drink, and not act out, and not be a slave to anything that is causing you these kind of ailments in your life, these troubles, these stresses. It talks about all your problems, not just your alcoholism. We're going to work on the condition, not the symptom. We're not going to treat alcohol or drugs like it's a bad sunburn that we put aloe on and then allow the rest of our body to do crazy things that, will bring us back to that. We're going to have a spiritual experience and treat all of it. And that's what Ebby is telling Bill. "Belief in the power of God, plus enough willingness, honesty, and humility. Those three words are circled: willingness, honesty, and humility. To establish and maintain the new order of things were the essential requirements. I have the words essential requirements underlined. This is going to be highlighted in orange. It says simple but not easy. And it is. It's simple. It's not easy, though. If it was easy, everybody'd be doing it. You know, I was lazy. I didn't want to do the work. I picked and chose what I wanted to do. That's just the bottom line. But when I got into it and started doing the work and started changing, I realized just how simple a program it is. It's like following the directions to baking a cake. A price had to be paid. You know, I talk about paying the price all the time. I'm paying the price right now. Giving of myself, giving of my time, wanting to help others, paying the price. Ask yourself, are you paying the price? You know, it means, or meant, destruction of self-centeredness. I have destruction of self-centeredness. I have underlined with 2 stars on the end. You know, selfish or self-centeredness is the root of our troubles, so it means that had to go. I must turn in all things to the Father of light, who presides over us all, which is just another way of saying, you know, God of your own understanding. This is going to be highlighted yellow. It says, these were revolutionary and drastic proposals, but the moment, and there's words in the book that, you know, precede or speak to action. The moment is one of them. Anytime you see the words the moment, you're going to circle them. You know, at the start, as soon as. These are all, you know, they're speaking towards action. You doing something, okay? The moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. There was a sense of victory followed by such peace and serenity as I had never known. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up, as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. Continuing on, yellow and underlined at this point. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. So, you know, it all came to Bill. Boom. You know, that wasn't my story. I got it in small doses. You know, certain steps, I got it in larger doses. You know, step 4, big dose. Doing my amends. Step 9, big dose. But it came to Bill. Boom. You know, boom, like a rocket. Like, blew up on him, and there it was for him. That's who it was. It's yellow because this is promised you from doing this work. That experience that happened to him, I know nothing about stocks or law. You know, I never rode with my girlfriend on a sidecar and did any of the stuff that he did. I never was in war, but I can relate to that. I can relate to those feelings of desperation and degradation, and I can now relate to that 4th dimension that he talks about. It's very much real for those of us who are willing to go to any lengths. For a moment I was alarmed and called my friend, the doctor, to ask if I were still sane. You know, this is happening to you. And you're just, oh my God, what's happening? Let me talk to Dr. Silkworth. He listened in wonder as I talked. So this is where the doctor's opinion comes from, with the medical estimation and seeing it happen on Bill. More of the program absolutely coming to fruition. It's just so many things that if this didn't happen or that didn't happen, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have this wonderful program today. You know, I believe in keeping the integrity of this program, and it's almost to the point where, like, I feel like we should all know this. We should all be so grateful that these meetings happened. Ebby and Bill, Roland Hazard and Ebby, Dr. Silkworth and Bill and Bob, Bob and Bill D's, all, it means so much. You know, I'm just really passionate about that. I really, really am. Finally, he shook his head, saying, something has happened to you, but I don't understand. This is Dr. Silkworth talking to Bill W. But you had better hang on to it. Anything is better than the way you wore. The good doctor now sees many men who have such experiences. He knows that they are real. While I lay in the hospital, the thought came that there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what had been so freely given to me. Perhaps I could help some of them. They, in turn, might work with others. So, Dr. Silkworth is seeing that how working with others is now becoming, coupled with the spiritual experience, the solution to combating alcoholism. So, I'm out of gas. We do only have a little left, but I believe when I do this work with you, I should do it in a capacity where I'm fresh and able to really take my time and explain it and not rush. Right now we're at 45 minutes. I would have liked to finish it, but we do have a few pages left. So what we're going to do next week is we're going to finish Bill's story, and then we're going to start There Is a Solution. I don't like, piecemealing the chapters together, but again, I've given you, the viewer, today quite a bit to look over, to understand, and I don't want to overload you guys. And usually, it takes a good effort to really explain this and get it out. It can be kind of exhausting, and I don't want to half step it, because what the book says about half measures, they avail us nothing. I want to make sure that I take my time and I'm clear and concise. So that's going to be it for this week. I always strongly suggest you guys go over the work that we do here together electronically. It only really makes sense when you put it into practical application, and that's the only way it's really going to work. If I teach you how to ride a bike, and then when I'm not with you, you're not practicing to ride that bike, you're never going to ride. If I show you how to make a soup, and then you don't practice making it for your family or for yourself, or your boyfriend, your girlfriend, whatever, you're never going to get good at it. It's the same thing. Opportunities are everywhere for spiritual growth in your life, and if you practice what we are being taught, or what I'm trying to convey to you, the viewer, and put it into your life, when we start getting into the steps, you're going to have a spiritual experience, and your life is going to change. Right now, we're still in a lot of the history. Bill's story is of paramount importance. Why wouldn't you want to know about the person who helped start this great program? So that's what we're going to finish doing today, and next week, that's where we're going to be at, and we'll go from there. Thank you for allowing me to serve, everybody. I don't know if I can express to you all out there in computer world just how much this feeds me, how much I enjoy doing this. This is one of my favorite things to do, helping other people, especially in this capacity, the way I was helped. This just does it for me. Some people like to ski, some people, like to cook. I like to help people through this book. I like to see people change. I like to be a vehicle that God has used to help others, get well and stay well. Stay well. And so that's all for this week. Until next week, namaste. Don't forget to pay attention, to pay it forward, and rely on God and not on others. We'll see you next Monday, folks. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.